What is Web 3? Example, Web 2, the age of the internet. That brought us the World Wide Web, email, and websites, also and apps on the smartphone. Web 3, the age of the blockchain, which brought us cryptocurrencies, NFTs, DeFi, esports, and also the metaverse. Radically changing the economic landscape and shifting global consciousness. My journey into Web3 started in 2013 as a partner working in an alternative investment firm in London, where I came across crypto for the very first time. I had no experience in tech or coding and was just doing general research. I remember what caught my attention was the mystery surrounding where and how Bitcoin was created. A peer-to-peer open source ledger, removing all intermediaries on all transactions and giving complete ownership to the beneficiary. Digital, decentralized, disruptive, promising economic freedom that would change the world as I knew it. I was inspired, to the point I decided to teach myself how to mine these Bitcoins and managed to put together the hardware to solve these complicated math problems needed to generate these Bitcoins. 1 Bitcoin became 20 Bitcoins. 20 became 50. In today's value, that is $1 million. And at some point, I needed somewhere safe to store all these Bitcoins I generated. However, back then, the community didn't have these wallets or exchanges that you see today. Enter Mt. Gox, an exchange that was handling almost 70% of all Bitcoin transactions. And like most people in the community back then, they handled almost all my transactions. Unfortunately, they got hacked for 850,000 Bitcoins. That's 16 billion in today's value. I lost all my Bitcoins overnight. And yes, I'm still undergoing therapy to this day. But we won't talk about that. We'll keep going. It's now been a decade since that experience, and what have we witnessed? Bitcoin is now globally accepted as the gold standard for cryptocurrencies, and now trading on a public listed exchange called Coinbase with a market cap of $1 trillion since its creation. And although the times are different in comparison, it took Microsoft, Amazon, and Apple all more than 20 years to reach trillion-dollar market caps. There are also new cryptocurrencies, like Ethereum, which is offering a variation of utilities, works as a token and a network allowing users to trade NFTs, another aspect of Web3 that is growing rapidly, especially within the last few years. The foundations of the industry is built on the blockchain, creating limitless possibilities that will redefine the future, even for established big tech companies like Facebook, who have explored their own cryptocurrency called Libra and changed the company name to Meta to accommodate the metaverse for the future. So some of you may ask, what does this new future look like? And what does it matter for Africa? But first, let us start with where Africa is today. The continent's population is around 1.4 billion people, with 70% of that taken up by the youth. And we have an estimated GDP of 2.9 trillion. The combined market caps for the 4 tech companies I mentioned previously is 4 times the size of Africa's total GDP. Now, some of you may argue that's an unfair comparison, given the effects of colonization. And although that's a valid point and cannot be ignored, I believe there's a huge opportunity for Africa to change the narrative and let the world know on this continent we are not exporting poverty. China, with similar population size to Africa, has increased its GDP by 16 trillion alone in the last 20 years. And you could argue that Africa is responsible for that huge increase. Africa, on the other hand, has only increased its GDP in the last 20 years by 2 trillion. Why is that? My theory is that Africa is relying on the same industries to achieve new economic outcomes, and this cannot happen. This is a very pernicious cycle that needs to radically change if we're to achieve something different for the next generation. So what does Africa powered by Web3 look like? And what are their advantages? The first advantage, the barrier to entry for Web3 in Africa can be way more accessible and a lot cheaper to develop in comparison to other industries that rely on huge investment to develop infrastructure. The second advantage, Web3's ability to scale using existing digital communities and networks that are already integrated into our daily lives through apps like Telegram and Discord, serving as global digital gateways for the youth. Through the blockchain, Africa can administer and build transformational decentralized systems that would change the approach to local trade and international trade, whilst providing accurate data on the value of our resources, which we can tokenize against our own tokens and currencies and not rely on foreign currencies. Land litigation. Digital versions of land can be converted into title deeds created and stored on the blockchain, showing accurate data of all its previous owners, transactions, locations, and valuations. Combined with the metaverse, of course, a virtual representation of the real world, which will open up a completely new dimension for Africa and investment into the continent. There'll be a lot more transparency and a lot more accurate data, creating an entirely new value system for the general population. It is no secret corruption and accountability is still a very big problem in Africa. And although that will not vanish overnight, the parameters in which that exists will change through Web3. Our elections, for example, will be monitored very differently through the blockchain. But all this cannot happen without education. To ensure an advanced future for Africa, it is important we lay the groundwork now by implementing Web3 into our educational curriculums. By doing this, we'll be preparing our youth for success in a decentralized future. Aside from the blockchain, things like gaming, DeFi, which is short for decentralized finance, by the way, and NFTs will all play a major role in the advancement of Web3. Particularly, with the youth being the highest engaged audience, it's in the continent's interest to get ahead by developing education that will create a new segment of job opportunities. First, developing a highly skilled local workforce in Web3 will be able to position ourselves to change the narrative, where big tech companies no longer come onto the continent and pay their staff better than the local talent we have. The domino effect will provide new income streams for recruitment, accounting, and legal firms. Through the metaverse, Africans can form partnerships in virtually immersive environments that will help us to learn and work very differently in the future with foreign counterparts. We'll be able to compete in sports very differently with the rise of esports and the opportunities that lay ahead for the African gaming community. Some of you may not understand the economic value in gaming and think it's just a game, but it isn't just a game. I personally came to terms with this when I met a friend now, Dr. Melita Moore, who sits on the board of the Global Esports Foundation in Ghana during a sports camp. She was hosting a tournament in partnership with the president of the Ghanaian Esports Foundation. And like most, I asked, why are you hosting an NBA tournament in Ghana? And what I found out was fascinating. According to online logins, Ghana was ranked within the top 10 countries for NBA 2K. Did you know that? I also learned a lot about all the different tournaments and teams that were participating in this space, and how some of the biggest teams were monetizing this industry by creating partnerships with real-life players, teams, maximizing visibility and licensing rights within gaming. Through esports, Africa will be able to host global sports tournaments. and maximize overall visibility for sports in Africa. This could be the same with the fashion industry and music industry. Through Web3, African creatives can begin to take full ownership of their IP and start to create long-term value in ways that have never been done before. Imagine an Africa where all the fine traditional local cloth can no longer be counterfeited or copied, with designers receiving royalty payments through smart contracts on the blockchain. An Africa where elections are governed fairly through the blockchain. An Africa where we can create crypto tokens against our own resources and stop relying on foreign currencies. An Africa where there is economic freedom, ownership, changing the course of Africa's destiny. As it stands, Web3 is still in its very early stages, with most countries still trying to figure out how to create policy and a balanced regulatory environment, which for me isn't a negative, but rather an opportunity for Africa to get ahead of time and reimagine its identity. This can be achieved by integrating Web3 into Africa's existing infrastructure. This will increase Africa's efficiency, productivity, innovation, and most importantly, ownership to its citizens. The possibilities for Web3 in Africa is infinite. So my call to action for the youth, adults, governments are as follows. Prioritize studying and implementing blockchain into education. Governments and institutions, let us create a sandbox which allows builders, established companies, and startups to test their products within an environment that is receptive. And we can filter through and find out which products have the best utilities to go into the public domain. Africa cannot afford to repeat the mistakes of the past. We must position ourselves where the ball is going to be and not where the ball is. Let this generation be bold. Let us change Africa's destiny. The future is forward. Thank you.